out on a cold, almost spring night, and thank you for your support of the STCHS speaker programs. I think Rob brought his own fan club today. So bashful. A quick thank you to Susie Williams, who does the technical whatever and makes it all happen and makes the microphones work. And thank you especially to my board members, Kathy Brown, Scott Belser, Catherine Santamaria, who is selling books over here. We have both of the books that Robb's photographs are stars of. I got a text from Lindsay, but she's not here, so we'll just say Lindsay's not here. Otherwise, a wave, and Patricia Gibson, of course, who's hiding behind this guy in his hat. A wave for all of you who are volunteers with STCHS, either as a docent or, come on, Anita and Mike, you guys do so much. We have a lot of room for more volunteers, so please see me and we'll get your name and start buttoning. The other announcement I have is that we have our next speaker on first Monday of April, and it's going to be sort of colorful and
First Friday.
Huh?
First Friday.
First Friday of April. Oh yes, I mean and also coming up really relatively soon, and I have the paperwork for, is the ever popular wine tasting cruise on Pine Mountain Lake. It's May 16th, and I'm sure it'll warm up by then. See me again after the talk, and you can pick up a ticket order form, or you can sign up to help me with the wine cruise, because that's a very labor-intensive event, and it's our biggest fundraiser for the historical society, so that we can do things like this and rent this room that we can't get into. I'm going to turn it over to Rob. He's completely self-contained. If anybody wants to chat at me about anything. Oh, and a special thanks to Bob Asquith, who used his secret code to open the doors. Yep.
Before we hand it over to Rob, how many of you heard about the new visitor center in Groveland? For those that haven't, Echo, Yosemite Base Camp, moved from the back building to the front, right on Main Street. And the very front part of their store is a community visitor center welcoming locals and out-of-town and out-of-country visitors. At the visitor center, you will be able to buy Yosemite Park passes. You will also be able to buy Yards bus tickets. So now you don't have to wait till you get to the gate to get a pass in Yosemite. If you don't have your annual or lifetime old person pass like I have, or if you want to take the Yards in, you can buy your Yards bus tickets right there at the new visitor center at Echo. Thank you.
And I was informed when I went down there that if a person were to ride Yards into the park, they do not have to pay the $100 foreign visitor fee. All right, now we're doing what Bert's going to
All right, can y'all hear me? Oh yeah. Well, first off, our little town is so cool. Like everything that happens here, and this big turnout for the events, and everything that STCHS does, and Harriet is just so proud of it. We're always so part of it, supporting it. Not a lot of little towns have this level of support, so it's awesome. And for me, it's really cool because, you know, we've been here now for 25 years. I'll give you a quick background on my wife and I, because, you know, looking at this room, there's a lot of very familiar faces for me. I've known for a long time, a lot of new faces. And that's great, you know, as we enjoy meeting people and expand everything we do. And just for a quick background for the folks that may not know anything that my wife and I have done in the past. So my wife's great-grandparents homesteaded here in Groveland in the 1870s. Her grandmother's Mary Laveroni. And we started Mountain Sage about 25 years ago as a real kind of community gathering place, as a clearinghouse of information and community events and things like that. And so we've been around the community for a while. We've had in now, we've looked at a bunch of different things. Now, my wife does more, Regina's more water conservation projects. I've kind of done more photography work, but we still oversee everything at Mountain Sage. And from the folks that have been here a while might know that we used to do concerts out there. We did a 10-year run of doing concerts. Then we had to take a 7-year hiatus to deal with some county permitting issues. Finally got that all resolved and improved our venue. Last year we did one kind of tester show to see how it went, and it went phenomenally well. 400 people show up, sold out tickets 2 months in advance, and we're going to do a series of shows this summer. And so, you know, I want to put this out for our Groveland community first because these shows will sell out. Like, we're going to get people from all over, super high quality music, really fun events. And so we're bringing the whole music scene at Mountain Sage back for the folks that knew about it before, and the folks that are going to come in for the first time. It's a really fun, really family-oriented scene for everybody. So we're excited to put that out there. That's actually nothing I'm here to talk about at all. The quick second, so you know that. So, you know, we moved up to start Mountain Sage. But before that, I worked as a biologist, a naturalist for a couple dozen years. And then I slowly evolved into using photography as a means to teach about the natural history that's out there for conservation and outreach and education purposes. That's kind of how I transitioned from being a biologist into photography. And the nexus of that was Mountain Sage. Once I started the business, photography became the main thing what I did. It's expanded into a bunch of different things. It's important to me, a lot of folks out there, you know, there's plenty of room for just photography as a fine art medium to put on the walls and enjoy the beauty and make a living out of it. I also think it's really important, imperative for photographers to use that voice and a vision for different things out there, whether it be conservation or outreach and education, just to help people understand what's out there in the natural world so we're more in tune with it, more likely to do good by it. And that's kind of been my focus in using photography. And y'all know I came out with this book with Beth Pratt a few months ago, and I was here doing a talk. And you know, how many of you here were at the talk I did a few months ago? Yeah, I figured there'd be a lot of new folks. So I was trying to figure out how many stories to repeat or how much to make fully new. So I had a combination of those. So a lot of new images, a whole bunch of stuff you haven't seen before, maybe 40 or 50 images that I didn't use before. But I'm going to repeat a few of the stories because I think they're really important to everything. So hoping y'all that were here before forgot those stories, or will just bear with me while you hear them again. And I changed the show up a little bit. So I talked a lot about some of the naturalistic anecdotes of the critters and some of the stories behind captured images. And I've added a little segment of it to talk a little bit more about storytelling. So not just images of, you know, a full frame image of an animal, but also an image that tells the context of that animal and its environment. And so I'll talk a little bit more about how I try to achieve that in the photography. That's a big part of this work. Yes. My tools here. Laser pointer, I'm told not to point at you because if I find somebody, it's an extremely strong laser pointer. And so generally in nature photography, a lot of photographers tend to get as close as they can to the animal and fill the frame with a picture of the animal. Because that's what they think is the best way to portray. And I argue that you can create amazing, more interesting images with the animal really oftentimes very small in the frame. And I call these kinds of images environmental portraits. Right? And the idea is to show the animal in the context of where it lives and what it does. And they're not always easy to do. The key is having an interesting backdrop or something interesting. So this is just literally like the quintessential bear crossing a log in Yosemite Valley.
lights down?
That's a great idea. I don't know, can we?
Eric's
Yeah, Eric's on it. That's a great idea. Yeah. More, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, great. So it's really just a bear crossing a log in Yosemite, but with the willows in the backdrop and the big leaf maples, it kind of puts in the context of what it's doing, where it lives. The bald eagle with just cottage trout. And, you know, there's oftentimes out there stalking animals, and I'm trying to find them out in the wilderness, in the deep backcountry woods. This is a crazy encounter when I was really driving on Highway 140 through El Portal. And on the side of the road that goes right along the Merced River. And I could see at the corner of my eye this bald eagle fly by. And I hit the brakes, pulled over, and I could see where, as I was pulling over, it alighted on a some kind of tree a long ways away. And so there was a berm between the road and where the trees were. So I caught the key with wildlife stalking and finding these animals is really not letting them know of your presence. And so it's a brilliant situation where I could literally walk down below a berm. So the bird couldn't see me until I was just in the right position to poke my head over the berm and look directly at the eagle. And really what makes these kinds of environmental portraits work are, interesting backdrops. It's really the lines of this big, beautiful oak tree and the moss on it that it really helps to highlight and complement the eagle out there. And so for maybe 10 minutes, I watched the eagle when it just caught this big trout in the river, just devour the whole thing, tail and all. Wildlife photography, like landscape photography, is just more interesting and appealing with compelling conditions, environmental conditions, or weather conditions. This is a red-shouldered hawk hunting in a heavy snowstorm in the Yosemite Valley. And just the dynamism of all the falling snowflakes and the branches help to show what this bird is doing in a heavy snowstorm. The golden eagle on a huge nest. Several things about this image that it really, I think it portrays. One of which is scale. So just to give you an idea, right? The golden eagle is a huge raptor. It has like a 7-foot wingspan. This nest, maybe from top to bottom, is 10 to 12 feet tall. Their nests are huge, built over several decades. And I was photographing this quite far away from the nearby ridge, looking down into it. So I have a really long telephoto lens, it's highly problem, a long way away. For all the times I'm out as a photographer, things don't work out, which is a lot of the time, whether the focus isn't right on the animal, or the lighting isn't right, or for whatever reason I don't capture the image. Every once in a while it feels like the stars align. So I've tried photographing this scene for several days, and all the time the sun was so direct on the whole rock face that it was super contrasting. And shadows were ultra dark, and the highlights were too light and terrible. Third time I went out there, I was out for maybe an hour, just watching the scene, and a little cloud came across the sun and diffused the light for maybe 20 or 30 seconds. Right at the time, the adult was there with the chick. And I was like, finally, I get this every once in a while. It comes together, makes you feel like, this is why I'm doing it, it's working out. So it's really fortuitous little window of time. And again, this nest is like up on a ledge, maybe 2,000 feet off the floor of Yosemite.
Wow.
Great gray owls are, just amazing animals in general, really a focal point of Yosemite. There's an isolated population in the Sierra Nevada that's its own disjunct species, different from all the other great gray owl populations that are around. Maybe 200 to 300 pairs in the entire area, really focused around Yosemite, but also in the foothills. So we have great gray owls that come into Groveland periodically. Some of you might have seen them on occasion. Huge birds of prey, and they have so many amazing qualities that it would be easy to do a whole show on great gray owls. But just to name a few, that it's an amazing facial disc that really allows them to hunt primarily by sound. They can key out tiny sounds away. They have these little rufflers on their wings, feathers, that have ruffles so that when they fly by, this is a bird with a 5.5-foot wingspan, can fly right by you, and it's silent. And I've had that happen when, like, I'm out there and it almost doesn't seem real. How can an animal that big not make a sound? All the ravens, all the adult birds here, even little birds, right? Hummingbirds, their wings make a noise. These huge birds don't make a sound. Totally amazing. This is kind of an epitome of a environmental portrait. This is a brown creeper. And this is really where they live. Like, they spend a lot of their time behind bark and in cracks and crevices looking for little insects to eat. It's also where they nest back in there. And so this little brown creeper poking its head out of where it lives. It's a really simple image, a little bunch of bark, but it's, believe it or not, one of my favorite images, because it really just speaks to where that animal lives and what it does. A different way to portray the brown creeper. And this isn't just a mediocre image of bark. Anyone see the bird in there? Yeah. So right here, we've got a really well camouflaged brown creeper. They spend their time on these trees, really hard to see them and pick them out. You know, camouflage, all these ways are just ways to tell the stories of these little creatures. There's another somewhat camouflaged tree frog in amongst on a lichen with a, or on granite with a bunch of lichen that's around. And putting animals like small in the frame with everything that's around them, which I'll see in the market right in the middle here, is really, they live in these huge rock outcrops and surrounded by it. And this is an image that honestly like isn't necessarily great light. Almost trying to photographing beautiful light where things are more compelling visually. That's always possible. Here, just the graphic elements of our environment right in the middle. And this breaks all photography rules, right? All those rules are don't put your subject right in the middle of the frame. And any photographers out here might have heard these rules. Bogus. Don't worry about it. Sometimes it's right to put in the middle, at times it makes more sense to put on the side, but there's no one right answer to any of it. Just trying to find something that works and looks good for what you're trying to do. So another animal that lives in a similar kind of rock environment, but an entirely different way to portray it. A small animal, within the granite outcrop as a pikelet. And these are ultra cute little critters. They're actually more related to rabbits than they are rodents. Well, they look like a rodent. They're a lagomorph, type of more closely rabbits. They're little, fluffy, ultra cute. Plenty of people argue they're the cutest animal in Sierra Nevada. I'm not one to argue against that. A lot of cute animals in the Sierra. They're the real denizens of the high Sierra rocky outcrops. Depth of field, yeah. So that's a few points. So I don't mind someone chiming in the belly. So from a photography standpoint, look at the difference here. Whereas in this frame, pretty much everything is in focus, and as well as the animal, right? And there's a reason for that. Because I want to see all the rocks. Versus this image, where it's just the pike in focus, and everything else out of focus. Kind of a depth of field issue for you photographers out there, but that's done on purpose, right? To highlight just everything. Everything else is in focus. You're not going to notice the pike as much. So those are the decisions that you make as a photographer. Thank you. Golden mantled ground squirrel. Also, just like the pike, overlooking its landscapes. A lot of these critters spend time just hanging out, looking for predators, warning other animals, warning their kin. And it's just a common pose. Again, like it's pretty simple, but just it epitomizes what these little rodents are doing a lot of their time, just trying to survive. There's a different way to portray the mantled ground squirrel. Just munching on some grasses. And from a photography standpoint, again, like it'd be easy to compose maybe just on the golden mantled ground squirrel, but kind of filling the frame with the rest of an interesting aspect is what those I'm trying to do through the lens. Sometimes I feel like these images are a little works of art. Right? I didn't plan this, but the beautiful arch of the lupin, dragonfly on it just feels very art-like to me. has that quality. Dragonflies themselves are prehistoric terrors of the sky if you're a little flying insect. Great blue heron hanging out on the Merced River. This actually, I think about it, this is also a drive-by find. I was driving down in the Yosemite Valley along the Merced River, and I saw this big blue heron on the rock out there. So I was able to pull over and kind of hide behind trees to get to a point where I could see it without any distraction or any thing obscuring it. And the cool thing about this situation is one of those rare opportunities where the bird was so still for such a long time. I was able to use a long exposure, so the shutter was open for several seconds. And that's what makes the water look all interesting, ethereal, and flow-like. But rarely does it ever happen when an animal is going to be still for several seconds. I've had a few opportunities like that. Whenever I see it, it's like, oh wow, it's a really unique opportunity. And this one just came out perfect. It's all fluffed up, you know, keeping warm. In the cold, it's on one leg, you can notice. So it's really just hanging out there, taking a snooze, or just roosting and hanging out. I get thirsty. I think I showed this one last time, I'm not even sure. This is a new image that wasn't actually in the book that I captured within the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, 9 months. And so I was showing a lot of those environmental portraits with animals small, like taken with a long telephoto lens, right, where I'm still really far from the animal. Now it's small in the frame. Another way to achieve that same kind of thing is to get really close to the animal and use an ultra-wide-angle lens. Now, I don't recommend this for everybody, but in my previous life as a herpetologist, I worked a lot with reptiles, especially rattlesnakes in the deserts of California. So I'm really comfortable with them. I'm not going to put myself in jeopardy in any harm's way. This snake, I found it was cool, calm, like not rattling, not doing anything, excuse me, that would provoke a response. And so I just very slowly, my camera was on a tripod, and I would just slowly advance my tripod, a little closer, a little closer. Not behind the camera, the tripod, well, that's striking distance like that. It's not going to strike at the camera because it's full. Right? There's no reason it's going to want to do that. And again, the sun wasn't even flicking out like it was worried about anything. And so, you know, I got close enough to be able to show where it lives from its perspective, kind of its view from a rattlesnake's perspective.
Where was that one?
Just off our property. And you know, I mentioned this before, I'll mention it again. So, I know plenty of folks' first reaction when they see a rattlesnake is to chop its head off. I highly discourage that. Rattlesnakes are a good part of our environment. They help control rodent populations, which right now are just taken off like all over the place. And if you ever have a rattlesnake, but that being said, I don't think you should be around your house, nor my house. Everybody else's. What I do is I move them. And if you're ever in a situation where you have a snake in a place that's too close for comfort, call me. I will come, I'll grab it, I will take it somewhere and release it where it's safe, and we're saving it, and we're, you know, also keeping you from any scary. I mean, I understand having them around is not a comfortable feeling, but they also don't need to be killed as a result, which is very important. Oh, so I concluded this time how I shot that. So here you can see the snake. This is my camera right up next to it. And literally from the front of the camera to the snake is maybe like a foot, less than that. Yeah. I do crazy things, right? Plenty of herpetologists are grabbing snakes with their hands and doing that stuff. Like, I'm really ultra cautious. Oh, here's the prey of the rattlesnake. So here's a big-eared wood rat. And wood rats are really phenomenal in so many ways, right? They build these big burrows over decades that they live in, and they end up being homes for lots of other animals that end up using them. There's several entrances in them, sometimes false entrances, so snakes will go in and then, like, you know, it won't go anywhere, they'll turn around. So like all these like fake ways to get in and out of their homes. They're also a bit of a nuisance. I don't know if any of you are having some wood rat issues, especially this year, but we've had like, they tend to get into walls, destroy wiring, engine compartments. We've had 3 vehicles destroyed by wood rats already this year. They're having a bumper year. That's how we need more rattlesnakes around to help kind of keep things in check. And I should mention, so this image was taken with a camera trap, as is the next one. I'm going to talk a little more expansive about the camera traps and how I capture some of these images when I'm not there. This camera was set up on this setting, on this composition, and had an automatic trigger and flashes to capture it when the wood rat was coming out and doing its thing. And so the last of the environmental portraits I'm going to show is one where I probably used the animal's slowest I've ever had in a frame. This is actually another relatively recent image from our property. It's not in the wildlife book. It's recent. This is also from our property. It was this really bizarre big branch that fell off of the oak tree, and it landed on this tripod with a little peak. And from the sign, I could tell it was used by owls. I found a pellet below it and little feathers. And so I set up my camera traps such that, you know, the camera's really far away and I flash and everything. And, you know, it shows how images can also evoke emotion. It has a little spooky feel to it, right? Kind of dark nature. This is a barn owl just happening out. So, you know, all images are also tend to be more interesting and appealing when there's multiple animals in the frame rather than just one animal. It does make it more interesting to look at. There's a couple of pond turtles in the reflections, and for some reason I can't help but giggle when I look at pond turtles because it looks like they're smiling. It always looks like they've got this little grin on their face. I don't want to anthropomorphize too much. I've got a happy life out there basking in the sun. This is one of the more challenging to capture. This is some rainbow trout. The male in the background, you can tell by his elongated jaw, different head. The female in the foreground. This is a spot where it was called bedding. So the female was building a nest. She'd get in there and kind of wiggle around a little bit and move the gravel, and then in time she'd lay eggs there, and the male would fertilize them. But to photograph these things underwater, I bought an underwater housing for my camera. And this was sitting on the edge of really slow-moving creek here, holding this whole thing underwater in like snow melt cold water. And within like a minute, my hands are numb, and there's this fish activity in front of me. I can't take the camera out of the water. I can't give up. And then I couldn't feel my hands for a while. But it was really cool because you don't have to get really close encounters with wildlife. These are fish that were doing their thing a couple of feet in front of me. And it was just cool to have that ability to watch them with their behavior and not impact them at all. So at that point, I just didn't really mind. My hands were terribly numb. I did it for a while until I got a couple of usable images.
What camera do you use?
What was the question?
What camera do you use?
Canon. And hold that question because I can talk fully about equipment and all that stuff. Happy to. Remind me at the end. I could go into more details about some of the equipment that I use. That also helps when you're multiple animals when they're cute, cuddly, little baby yellow-bellied marmots. And I'm going to show this image in the next one tomorrow. They are some of the most photogenic and charismatic of any animals to photograph. They tend to be a little lazy. They just hang out in the sun, out on the rocks. When they're engaging, doing their thing, they just have these funny postures, mannerisms that is super fun to watch and to photograph. Those two babies, they're two adults during their courting season. And this, you can almost tell, like, for those of you with a photographic eye, This is like a really old image on slide from, this is probably from 20 years ago in my early photography career that was still included in the book. But you can tell how grainy it is, it's not as sharp. That was an old slide from, but it's still such a wonderful embrace. It's one of my favorite images that we used it. The newer technology just looks much better. But doesn't mean that some older stuff isn't still extremely worthwhile or useful. I just had the cutest tender embrace after watching these two adult yellow-bellied marmots chase each other for over about an hour in this high country. These are massive bats, super cool. Biggest bat in North America. They have a 2.5-foot wingspan. Not much is known about their biology because they just hard to study, right? And not a lot of effort necessarily to put into them. There are a few known roosts in Yosemite. The Park Service biologists turned me on to them, gave me the insight, the approval, essentially, to photograph them. And I think they're cute. That's getting bad rap. I think that's great. We need more bats. Mosquitoes, all those other nasty flying insects. This is like the only place they're known in Yosemite is a roost that is about underneath this flake, maybe 50 feet off the ground. And so there's, it varies the numbers of them. There can be 15 to 30 of them that are tucked up underneath this overhang. And in one of the fun attempts, but failures in the photography of the book, one of the park bat biologists, who's also an amazing climber, set up a portaledge for me over on the side. Like he climbed up, this is like 50 feet off the ground, he climbed up on top, rappelled off, set up a whole portaledge over here. For those, basically it's a ledge, you hang off a rock. And I G-marked up to the portaledge, all of my camera gear and flashes, trying to photograph the bats flying out of that roost at night with infrared set. Total failure. Not a single image. By the time the bats came out, it was too dark. I couldn't do it. And I just remember that the adventure was super fun because I'm not a serious climber. I've got some confidence with ropes, but not like these guys. So it's pitch black. Like I'm on the portaledge. I have to rappel off of it with 40, 50 pounds of all my camera gear. And I'm like leaning over this portaledge into the dark blackness. And I'm like just trying to like hold myself together. Thinking, oh, this is so much fun.
I like the composition of the
Family groups are also great, right? You got individuals, a couple different animals, whenever you get a family group in the frame, that's kind of the next level. Otters, believe it or not, are not commonly seen in Yosemite, but in a handful of areas, they're really present. There's some debate as to whether they were historically in the high country of Yosemite, because there were fish up there historically, but some people argue that there were so many frogs, reading on the frogs, it's not really known where they were. But they've now moved into some areas in Yosemite, some of the lakes, and Yosemite Valley. And so these were taken in Yosemite Valley, and it's interesting because over a period of years, I was seeing them a lot. But this entire past year, I have not seen any in the valley. I don't really know whether they've gone or what exactly is happening. But, kind of like marmots, they're pretty fun animals to observe. They frolic in the snow, and they engage in such ways that it's super photogenic and enjoyable to watch and witness. Some green-winged teals, family on a log, really makes this kind of image work. It's just a beautiful reflection, really contrast. Really common bird, but still doesn't, it's not worthwhile to photograph in an interesting way. The family of barn owls. There are 3 juveniles that were born in this cavity, and this is just as they were first learning to fly and come out. And this is also on our property. In fact, the owl that was on that one little tripod thing is probably one of the parents of these guys. This is taken with an infrared camera. So for some of the sensitive nocturnal species, I had a camera converted to infrared, and I'd use filters over the flashes. So with the flashing, it's like a very dull red light comes out. So it really doesn't affect any of the sensitive nocturnal animals. And that's why this is black. It renders the image in kind of a red tone picture. You convert it to black and white to look like this. But I have a few different images I'll show you that we've taken like this way, so I can photograph at a nest and not disturb these little guys. What do we got? Oh yeah, I forgot to include it. This is another. This is one of the nights I first gotten a specialized trigger to photograph things that are flying fast through the sky. So I had some ideas to photograph both owls in flight, bats in flight, and things like that. So I had this amazing LiDAR detector that can fire the camera ultra fast. So I basically had this thing set up outside, and all night long, when the birds are coming in and out of the nest, this thing was firing. And there's a lot of frames captured, really a couple of them where you can see the cool owl coming in with its cavity. Acorn woodpecker families. These guys also kind of get a bad rap. I know some folks out here probably are annoyed by them. They're really loud and can be gregarious, and they can destroy houses. We have them hammering and putting a granary into our house. That being said, they're really cool. They live in these extended family units where they've got several generations of families and young help take care of the other young. It's a really complicated familial relationship. They make these granaries, right, where they drill holes in places, and they store wood, they store acorns for the off season, basically. They're super busy, always working at stuff. And again, it's having multiple critters, multiple animals in the image is more interesting as well. I think I mentioned this story before, but I'm going to quickly do it again. These are killdeer. And these guys have some of the more interesting life histories. They're called altricial, where they nest. What that means is when the eggs hatch, within an hour after the chicks emerge from the eggs, they're on their feet running around and feeding themselves. The adults never feed the young. And so this chick, I had this ability to watch this family for the entire breeding season, from when they were incubating the eggs until when they hatched. I was there on the day they hatched, which is something I really wanted to do for a while. So this chick is maybe 3 or 4 hours old, already running around, eating. It's listening to the adult when there's a warning call, go hide, goes and hide, things like that. The next image shows two of them. So this one's older. This one is only like 30 minutes old. Now it's all wet, it's just coming out of the egg. But within an hour or two, it's going to be this size. And by the end of that afternoon, all 4 chicks, all 4 eggs that were in that nest, hatched, and those 4 young took off. Like, the adults are with them, they never see them again. They're on their feet, they're running around, and hiding out in the shadows. It's really, not many birds have this life history story. It's a really cool one. Animals engaging, doing things together are always more interesting. For those of you thinking this is a male and female getting frisky, you'd be wrong, and you're a little dirty. These are 2 male toads wrestling for dominance in a shallow pool. So these are Yosemite toads, a super rare, it's actually an endangered species in the high elevations of Yosemite, and they nest in these, or they breed in these shallow pools that are only a few inches deep, that are fed by snow runoff. And those pools are only there for a very short period of time. So they also have an amazing, very similar to the killdeer, and they have a very fast reproductive strategy. These shallow pools only hold water for so long, so they lay eggs in there. Once the males figure out who's the dominant one here, these are 2 males wrestling. They will try to shove the other male's head into the water and show their force to claim a little space. The females come in, lay eggs. They are fertilized within like 9 days of eggs hatch like tadpoles, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, those tadpoles evolved into little frogs. So it's a crazy, amazingly fast reproductive strategy to deal with these ephemeral, not long-lasting pools of water. This is like 10,000 feet from this in the country. Here's another wild kingdom. Well, you know, one thing I'll go back to this because enough people weren't here before. So, you know, I kind of said a similar thing last time. You know, people go all over the world to have these big, amazing encounters with megafauna. They go see grizzlies pulling salmon out of the rivers, and elk rutting, and Yellowstone, and polar bears. And those are all great, and those are great encounters. This encounter, watching two male toads wrestle while I'm laying in the mud like 15 feet away, was just as good to me as any of that megafauna. This is like real biology, just on a smaller scale. I think it gets overlooked a little bit. Because everyone's out for the big, grandiose things. They get a lot of clicks on social media. This is another like wild kingdom moment right in front of me. So I was in a field of flowers in Yosemite Crane Flat, and I saw a butterfly that was in a strange position. And on closer inspection, I saw that the butterfly was being eaten by a crab spider. There's a spider right here eating this fruit-layered butterfly. I'm like, oh, this is great. I got the camera set up on a tripod, photographing this thing, like this is ultra, you know, musical, a wild kingdom moment. And then the skipper lands on the flower. And I'm like laughing to myself on the camera, saying, that is just too weird to let happen. But it's all right there, you know, on a small scale. Here's another, like, sometimes, you know, interactions, you just don't know what they are. This is a really bizarre situation. It's kind of a bit of a fun story behind it. We were paddling, my wife, son, and I were paddling out on one of the lakes in Yosemite. Noah, my son, yelled, hey, there's a snake. Saw a snake on a rock on the shore. So we paddled around behind it, and they got on a rock looking down onto this relatively large garter snake. And it was sitting on the rock sunning itself. After about 10 minutes, it would go out, swim through the rocks, and go hunt for fish. Come back to the rocks, sun for a little while, and take another lap, and go for more fish. And so we watched it for maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, totally lost track of time, thinking one of these times it was going to be successful and come back with a big old fish. Never saw that, so it never caught a fish. But one of the times it was out there sunning, a dragonfly landed on its head. Don't know why. Just a bizarre situation, looking for a place to light, grabbed my camera, got down more kind of a lower level to look directly at it, and hung out photographed for a while. I don't think there's any reason behind it. I think it was just a happenstance, kind of bizarre situation, but kind of cool. It needs a title. So I need a good title for that.
Red tongue.
What's that? Think about it, we'll come back to it afterwards.
What kind of snake is that?
It's a garter snake. Yeah, so it's a Sierra garter snake, specializing in fish and amphibians. They live always around water. Animals doing things are always fun. There's a pika, I showed you a small image of the pika and the grand landscape. This is the pika caching food for the winter. So they are very industrious critters at, again, high elevation Yosemite. They live at 10,000 plus feet, really rough winters. They stash lots of food for the winter. And so this is the willow here, that they have this amazing, even in their caches of food, so they're putting different layers of plants. So for instance, on the bottom layer of the plants are oftentimes the things that are most resistant to insects and rotting. So that's going to be the food they're going to have latest in the season. And the food on the top is stuff that it doesn't last as long necessarily. So it's really intricate way of stashing the food for the winter underneath huge 10 plus feet of snow in the high country. Canyon wren. Really carefully. So the canyon wren with I don't even know what kind of insect it is, at its nest. Canyon wrens have heard quite a beautiful vocal songs of any of the birds, a beautiful cascading series of whistles that really speaks to being in the canyons of Yosemite or pretty much anywhere in the Southwest. Anytime animals birds bringing prey back to nests is always attractive for me. Like that's a way to get them doing things, and it's always fun to see what they're eating, what they're bringing back to their chicks. This is a pygmy owl with a fence lizard. And owls, for instance, pygmy owls are small, right? So maybe the bird itself is maybe only this tall. Really small. But they are some of the fiercest predators out there. They're known to take prey 2.5 times their size. Unbelievably aggressive and fierce predators. But they'll take whatever they can with whatever is available to them. So another way to portray the pygmy owl is just poking its head out of its cavity. This actually could go in more of those environmental portraits images, pygmy owl. So I want to tie in ecological connection with images. So this is not just a beautiful Sierra blue butterfly on a stunning shooting star flower, but this plant is actually the host plant for the butterfly. So the butterfly lays eggs on the shooting star. Those eggs hatch. The larvae feed on this plant, Dodecathion, and then they pupate, emerge into butterflies. The butterflies find another shooting star to reproduce on. So it's kind of a full circle ecological connection within an image, as well as just being pretty. A lot of butterflies have a really tight connection with only one or two types of plants. The cool sphinx moth hovering. I don't know if y'all know that a couple years ago, there was like a sphinx moth explosion. For some reason, they were everywhere. Both in our place here in Groveland, on the east side of Sierra, I saw them everywhere. They're essentially they're hummingbirds. The way they fly, this bigger body, and this amazingly long proboscis to be able to reach down in these flowers and grab nectar. There's a lot going on in this image, right? If you look carefully, we got a bobcat head. If you look more carefully, we got it eating the ground squirrel. And this is definitely one of the highlights in my natural history photography moments, being able to capture its head around a tree. And enough of you weren't, because I'm going to briefly tell this story again, because I think it's an interesting one for folks that are wildlife observers to do things that don't impact the animals. So I was in Yosemite Valley, just wandering around looking at these photographs, saw a bobcat, it was clearly stalking something. Through vegetation, I could see that it was after something. Through another part of the vegetation, you could see there was some ground squirrels that were taking a dust bath. And so the initial impetus might be to move my position to get a clear look, to be able to see this impending action that could be epic photographically, to see the bobcat attack the ground squirrel. But I knew instantly that if I moved my position, I might scare the ground squirrel or the bobcat and ruin the hunt. And so I decided to stay put and not move at all. And moments later, all chaos broke loose. I heard this blood-curdling squeal of the ground squirrel. The bobcat had it. And then as I was walking away, peeked around some trees and gave me this one look that I was able to photograph. And might lose some opportunities by not pushing, but it's really important. Both this photographers in particular tend to push it a little too hard with animals and impact their behavior. But also sometimes wildlife watchers can do the same thing. So it's really important for all of us to let it take its place, let it happen, and then we're lucky to get a look at it than we are. So essentially, I was shooting through the other image of the Canada goose in here. But look here, this is a Canada goose who at the end of the day is rotating its eggs in its nest. So this is a spot on one of the lakes out in Yosemite that I found this nesting bear. I spent some time photographing them. And I set up a camera right near the nest. And I was hiding on the island nearby, so it wouldn't know that I was present, and I would just fire when this thing happened. And at the very end of the day, it went through this process of getting its huge head and neck underneath its eggs and rotating them all around so that they were evenly incubated so that they would all hatch at the same time. Okay, so I've talked a bunch about camera traps, and I think it'd be worth it to dive into that just briefly to show what that's about. It's a really wonderful way to photograph animals and not intrude on their space, and to get the more elusive animals that are really hard to find, capture, and see. This is kind of my standard field setup. I've got in this box is a weatherproof sealed box, and my camera goes in here with some electronic equipment. There's a stand that I put the camera on, and in the backpack is some flashes and some of the electronics to be able to talk to each other. This would be a standard setup. So there's a game trail right here. It was heavily used by mountain lions. This is an Oakhurst friend of mine. Helped me, locate this area. Under here's a camera. This is a little infrared trigger, so it detects heat basically. And there's flashes up here and here in case it's nocturnal activity. And you see all these amazing images of camera trapping. I'll show you a handful of pretty cool ones. But the reality is, the majority of the time, you get this. Mountain lion's butt. Or this. A black bear about to eat your camera trap. And it's almost like a rite of passage for camera trappers to have bear bites on their camera traps. For some reason, bears are extremely inquisitive. Their sense of smell is so great. They really just don't know what the smell is on there. And so they will just gnaw on the camera traps. So I've got a lot of bear heads, a lot of bad focus bear heads, a lot of bite marks on my boxes. That being said, occasionally you get images like this. And so this was that same camera trap setup I said I showed you a few minutes ago. So I'll go back a second here. So it was this setup. It's the same tree. That's that beaming, branch in the backdrop. Low perspective with the camera, so you see the grasses. And that's the image of the plant. Here's another system, the camera trap. This is on our property in Groveland. For some reason, this guy just looked at the camera and decided to munch on it. We got little stickers on them and kind of how big their claws are. It's a really cool perspective of a black bear that we would never be able to get otherwise. Here's another one of the more images maybe I'm most proud of. Really hard to get. That was high on my list to capture for the wildlife book. The ringtail. Elusive, rarely seen, but they're known around. Plenty of sign, stuff like that. And so, full disclosure, the park biologists clued me into a spot where these animals, like several other ones, including otters and others, have latrines. They go to the bathroom in the same place regularly. If you find the bathroom, they're coming in and out of there periodically. So the biologist clued me into the latrine of these guys. So I set up my camera trap outside of the area, trying to get it coming in and out. And to show you what that camera trap setup looked like. The latrine was back under the rocks there. The photograph I got was around this rock. Here's the camera. The camouflage, a couple flashes on the side. The crazy thing is this one is set up on like a ledge, way above the Merced River in the canyon, inside the park, but in the Merced River Canyon. So with camera trapping, like any landscape photography or general wildlife photography, it's fortunate if there's a compelling composition. Not just a picture of an animal, it gives it a cool composition to photograph. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm looking for places to set these things up. So this is actually on our property. And there's a game trail that comes through here, and there's a big, beautiful oaks in the backdrop. So this is one of the first camera trap setups to test my gear out a while ago, and I didn't even have like camouflage covering, so I just put my detectors and my flashes in vegetation. I put a bunch of grasses on them, there's flashes up there. But I caught this bobcat moving through the scene with the really cool oak trees in the backdrop. And this fox, the same spot, different composition, the same trees. And it's very much worth mentioning, for full honesty, that I had the composition all dialed and lined up, but the rain and all the cool, the moon coming through the clouds was pure luck. There's no way to plan that. When the fox moved to the area, all those components came together and made it more interesting than just the fox itself out there. There's a last camera shop setups. We found this bog that was coming across a creek, and as you can imagine, that was just a mecca. Right? Any animals that are around are going to be using that to cross. And so I set up a camera trap here, a couple of flashes, and the bobcat. So I'm kind of going through different ways to photograph the animals, the scenic ones, the animals small, close-ups, animals doing things. Also, just close-ups of animals can be really compelling. This is a sooty grouse. They have some of the most beautiful, intricate, compelling feathers that are out there. They're beautiful. And when they're in their camouflage, in their element, they're really, really hard to see. Close up of a garter snake. And I'm going to do this one just because it's really interesting with its blue eye. So some of you may know this, but all that means is that they're about to shed. So snake's eye is actually a scale that's over the eye. And when they shed, that scale turns blue before they lose all their skin. So it's kind of a creature. They can't see very well during that time period. They can hide out. And not doing very much. But this is one that's just about to shed on the side of the Sierra. One of the wildlife images with a few of full frame. I keep saying I try to capture animals doing something or family groups and that. There's also time for just a full frame image of an animal. When they're interesting enough, like this fisher, these are highly endangered species, a big member of the weasel family, but there's only maybe 100 or so known individuals in southern Yosemite and southern Sierra Nevada. Not very many of them. Park Service has a lot of work to study to figure out what the needs are. They're doing a little bit better. One of their interesting natural history elements is their rear ankles can rotate 180 degrees, enabling them to not just go trees, but they can go down trees head first. So bears and all the animals you know of, cats, tend to back their way down trees. These guys can go down head first. So they hunt from trees, from above animals, and go after them. Kind of crazy. And so this whole foot can rotate all the way around 180 degrees. And a full frame image of something this cute is just always going to work, right? This is a baby spotted owl that had just left the nest. Oftentimes, for some reason, these owls leave the nest far earlier than other birds. Oftentimes, birds don't leave the nest until they're fairly capable flyers, or just being able to fly. Oftentimes, the owls leave the nest before they can fly at all, and extremely vulnerable during that period of time. There's sort of little fluff balls out there until they get their wings and share a little bit. Okay, so the last little wildlife story was one of my favorites for Brian. It's like, oftentimes people think of nature photography as a romantic endeavor, that I'm out there just taking cool pictures of animals and having fun, this and that. Don't get me wrong, it's a lot of fun, but this story kind of exemplifies that it's a bit of a trudge and maybe not as romantic as folks oftentimes think. So for the wildlife book, I really wanted to capture an image of a bat in flight. And as you can imagine, a really hard thing to do. Park biologists informed me of a highly active bat roost underneath the bridge in Briceburg. So this is outside of Briceburg, or in Briceburg, outside of Yosemite, on Highway 140 exiting the park, on a bridge going over the Merced River. And so I went down there, checked it out, and there's just a lot of bats flying all around to see where they were coming in and out of, a really small area, and so it looked had that potential to do this. So I set up my camera on a tripod here. This is that ultra fast trigger that can catch things moving, and respond quick enough to capture them in the camera. And then I had some flashes set up. And I got all this gear set up, and then I put a lawn chair, like a reclining chaise lounge chair over there. Because during the night, like, I got up, I got laying there in my sleeping bag, I'd get up, and I'd make adjustments to the flashes, and all night long, there's like cars, like, roaring by over here, the flashes are going off, I'm getting up, trying to make the adjustments, hoping a cop doesn't come and say, what's this weirdo doing underneath the bridge, hanging out there, electronic here? And I get up in the morning, and nothing usable, not even anything close to it, image of a bag, just out of focus or out of frame. And I was extremely disappointed. So I decided I just wanted to get a look at them. I want to look at these little buggers. So I climbed up onto this podium here. And I wriggled my way back into there, throughout this back door, right? To get the look and to see where they were. But once I got in there, I saw these guys. And these are all these Mexican free-tailed bats, just packed into this little crowd center. There's hundreds of them up in there. Just sandwiched, and this little dude's got his eye open. And it's one of my absolute favorite images. It just speaks so well to it. I ended up coming back and trying it another night. And the second time I was successful with it, and caught the image of an initially, this is actually the same roost, but a different species of bat. This is a Canyon myotis that is using the same roost as all of those Mexican free-tailed bats. And I think that's the last time I bought it. I included a few bonus landscape images for you guys just because I don't just do wildlife. And I was in Yosemite during that last snowstorm, like 4 days when it was closed, and we got loads of snow here. And it was so much fun. I spent 4 days trudging around through waist-deep snow. I could barely find time to eat because I was having so much fun. And I captured some really, really cool images of Yosemite under just some epic conditions. Here's a Capitan. This image really evokes what was going on at the time. Heavy snowstorm, snow loading. This had just broken that day. So I photographed this same group of trees, I love the lines, the day before. I went back the following day to photograph because I thought the conditions were even more interesting, heavier snow. It was broken. My first thought was, oh no, my composition's ruined, right? I went out there and actually enhanced it. I think this is really what makes it work. Fresh break and just epitomizes the conditions, heavy snow loading, loads of tree failures, both in Yosemite and obviously in all our foothill communities here. And it's really what it felt like when I was out there. Bridal falling, full of snow. But these are terrible resolution. I did bad colors. And that's my last one. That's kind of my favorite. It's a really bizarre grouping of little grasses that were sticking up to the snow and popping down. It's a simple little interesting graphic design. I like photographing everything, landscapes, big grand landscapes, intimate landscapes, wildlife, a little bit of everything. All right, and that's that. Happy to answer questions. I love questions and dialogue. Any questions? It's out of the realm of acceptance are okay. Questions? Over there. Yes.
So, Rob,
Yes.
we want this great image. I'm loud.
Okay. We bought this great image from you over Christmas. And it was a photograph that you took that encompassed the sunset hitting Horsetail Falls.
Oh.
And you told us that you hiked in 11 hours to do,
Well,
or something like that?
11 miles.
11 miles.
I skied in 11
I
miles.
skied in 11 miles. So we've been talking about it since going, I wonder if you spent the night there or you skied back in.
Oh yeah, no, I spent the nights out there. Yeah. Just for showing. Yeah, but we all know Horsetail Falls, right? That amazing phenomenon in Yosemite. I really tried, I wanted to photograph it from a different perspective, not with the thousands of people that are down the valley for the same kind of thing. And so I knew of a spot, like on the south rim of Yosemite, and so skiing out Glacier Point Road, and then going across the country, I went out there over numerous times to photograph it, and it was just an epic experience. Horsetail Falls is a tough one because it's become so popular that it has some negative impacts, and it's challenging, but it's such an amazing phenomenon to see and to witness. I don't think anybody should, give them the opportunity. I just wanted to see it in a place where I didn't have to like everybody else. For me, photography is really a wilderness experience, right? Generally speaking, if I see a spot, even a spot that I love, that I shoot a lot, but I see a bunch of people there or cars, I'll go somewhere else. Like I really want to be alone in nature. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to see, I don't want to worry about them in my frame. I don't worry about me being in their frame. I just want to really connect with the natural, surroundings. And in that situation, I had some wildlife as well. I'm a bit of a loner when it comes to out there and photographing. That's why I skied 11 miles out to a crazy spot to go try to visualize that. Thanks. Yeah. There's got to be some more questions. Come on. Yeah.
Do you enhance any of the photographs with your computer?
So the question was if I enhance the photographs on my computer. So all photography these days, you have to do some post-processing to get the image to look like, anything. The raw files that come right out of the camera look terrible. I put them on my computer and be like, that guy's a terrible photographer. But that's just because the raw files don't have that kind of detail. So you have to bring that detail out. So I do processing, but my goal with the processing is to do the least amount possible, both because I don't have the patience on the computers I do out in the woods. That's also not my main skill set, but also my goal with photography is to make it look as natural as possible. So a lot of folks these days in the nature photography world really it's amplified. The saturation is blown up, and the skies are ultra dark. They look almost fantasy-like. That's not my style. I really want to make it look like if you were standing next to me, you would be seeing the same scene. That's my goal with how I process work. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, do you only shoot a digital or do you shoot some film?
Yeah, just digital now. There's, at least for me, there's no reason to shoot film. It's just the cost of the film, the processing, the ability to work on the computer. It's just there's so many advancements, and the resolution is better, and just everything about digital generally better than film. Unless you're shooting film, for box, which is big, really large format camera. Then there might be advantages to shooting film, I suppose. That being said, plenty of people still shoot film, and good on them. I don't mean to say, I mean for me, it's great. I'm not one of those guys that says, you can't do certain things in so many ways to photograph. So. Yeah.
You were going to talk about your equipment for somebody else.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So first off, I'm not like an equipment junkie. Right? I've never been the guy with the latest, greatest gear. I've always made do with what I've had. I feel like you certainly can. But that being said, I have made advances. I've got professional quality gear for sure. So I shot with Canon my whole life. So I had a film camera, I had a Canon film camera, so I already had some lenses. When I made the transition digital, it made sense to go Canon, right? So I moved up, I've got a Canon R5, this is my main body that I use. It's a phenomenal camera and body. And I guess what I should say is like, I don't buy a lot of gear. What I do is a big jump up. And when I made the jump up from the newer technology, the Canon R5 and their newer 100 to 500 zoom lens, a really long zoom lens that has incredible focus tracking and tracks the eye, the animal's eye focusing. It was like, blew my mind. It was so much fun again to photograph things, try things I hadn't done before, wasn't able to do before because of the equipment, and I was just doing all this out of town blast. And so, like, as much as I say I don't need the latest gear, there's some advantages, and some of the stuff really helped to amplify, what I was doing and make things even more fun that I wouldn't have attempted otherwise. And then I guess I should add, so I have a couple other bodies, so in the camera traps, I have some other Canon bodies, other lenses, not super high-end gear in case, bear eats it, or some of the stills that I did have during the big fire in Oakhurst several years ago. Like $5,000 of my camera shop gear burned on my friend's property out there. So, yeah, that happens. Yeah.
When you're out there, are you stationary most of the time or on the move most of the time?
Both. So there's times when, for instance, there's a big beautiful meadow, I will just go to the edge of the meadow, hide out and just sit there and wait and see what happens. Great way to see wildlife. Meadows are meccas for wildlife, really high density, so just sitting there quietly is a great way to see stuff. Other times I'm walking around just quietly, I'll see something, I'll hide behind trees, really trying to obscure my presence. So really, really a combination of both in that situation. I also use blinds, so I have several different, basically like a tent that's camouflaged, I can set up and hide inside of it. So I can photograph things, and then animals, I can be moving a little bit, animals will not know my presence. Super valuable to photograph wildlife. Yeah.
Which animals smell you a mile away, and which ones don't smell?
Bears, hands down. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's amazing to me a couple times when I've been like, long way from bear. And, I'm like, oh, never he see me, and I was like, oh, I got plenty of time to go find him, like, a little change of wind or something. Consider, sniff, looks up, starts sniffing a little bit, it's like he did something. They're amazing. Their sniffers are phenomenal. If you guys like, here's a crazy side note, if you like things like that, like animal senses, and how incredibly powerful they are, there's this great book by Ed Young called An Immense World. And it goes through biology, how animals have the hearing, vibration detection, sight. It'll blow your mind. It is absolutely a phenomenal book, talking all the latest research and science about how animals detect things and how they live in that world.
What's the title?
An Immense World by Ed Young. Everyone sleeping yet? Everyone sleeping yet? Anything else?
Do you carry a weapon of some sort?
No, I don't carry anything. I have occasionally carried bear spray, like when I'm going into an area specifically to like look for bears, or I haven't in a long time. I used to do that. I haven't in a really long time. Honestly, man, I'm more worried about people than I am the animals out there. So many mountain lions have seen me. So many, guaranteed. And I've never seen one in the wild. For all my time in the woods, all my time, I've worked with the biologists in some of the most dense mountain lion populations in California. Sign everywhere. And I never saw them. And on our property in Groveland, it's like a joke with my family. I know. Because everybody sees them. My mom did, my friends will come for the weekend, stay, I'll be out of town a little bit, they see a lion walking by our front yard. It happens over and over again. And to this day, I've never seen one in the wild. My point is that, like those kinds of animals don't want to see black bears. Really, it would be a fluke, a bizarre thing. More ants and squirrels hurt people in Yosemite than bears. I don't think there's actually a reported case of a bear harming, a black bear harming someone in Yosemite.
Thank you.
I wouldn't have to use a weapon anyway.
I brought a little sample. How many of you were here when Janet Gregory talked about the airport at Pine Mountain Lake? Well, here's her book. We have several copies for sale in the museum, and Janet has agreed to come back and talk about it some more because she was such a big hit. But if anybody wants to give me $25 tonight, I can sell 2 of them, or you can come to the museum and buy plus tax anytime you like. It's really entertaining,
Yes.
as is she. And thank you very much.
Yes.
Got both of the Robb Hirsch photography books over here for sale, and I've got a sign-up sheet for all of you who want to help me do some stuff.